This is the Town of Lancaster Conservation Commission meeting of May 14th, 2024. I'll begin by calling the roll. Bruce McGregor.
Here.
Jim LaValle.
Here.
Tom Seidenberg is also here. We also have Brad Stone, Lancaster Conservation Agent. First item up on the agenda, we have a continued notice of intent for Zero Heritage Lane. Matt Marrow's on the line.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I'm actually requesting another continuance. I had sent an email to Mr. Stone about, I want to say, a half an hour ago. I have to go out and finish up some of the work on the wetland area that, Brad had asked me to, but I have been down sick and I've been basically playing catch up. So I should have that done very shortly. So if I could just have one more continuance, I would appreciate it.
Sure. Our next meeting is May 28th. Is that fine?
Yeah, that works.
Happy to take a motion.
I'll make a motion to continue to the 28th of May.
Jim, do we have
Sorry,
a
I was
second?
muted. Seconded. Yep.
All right. Motion has been made by Bruce, seconded by Jim to continue to May 28th. Any further discussion? Seeing none, this will be a roll call vote. Bruce McGregor.
Aye.
Jim LaValle.
Aye.
Tom Seidenberg also votes aye. Okay, thanks, Matt. Next up on the agenda, we have continued notice of intent for 10 Fire Road 54. I believe this is also being continued. Is that correct, Brad?
Yes, we did receive a request on Friday to continue this one to the June 11th meeting.
Okay. Happy to take a motion.
Okay, I'll make a motion to continue this to June 11th.
Second.
All right, motion's been made by Jim, seconded by Bruce to continue to June 11th, was it? Is that correct?
I was checking the calendar. 11, yes.
Okay, this will be a roll call vote. Bruce McGregor.
Aye.
Jim LaValle.
Aye.
Tom Seidenberg also votes aye. Okay. Next up on the agenda, we have a continued notice of intent for 320 Bolton Road. I see Bob Parente is online. Would you like to bring us up to date, Bob?
Good evening, everyone. It's good to see you again. Can you hear me okay? Said yes?
Yep.
Yes.
We can hear you, Bob.
Oh, okay,
Thanks.
cool. All right, I sent over, yesterday, I sent some cross sections over to Brad, of the compensatory and the fill areas. I think I probably misspoke at the last meeting because when we were talking and Brad was asking about the elevations of the fill area, I was looking at the elevation like near the test pits that was out of the floodplain. So it's just, I hadn't looked at the plan in a while because there was such a delay between the meetings. But so anyhow, the the new plan or the additional plan is the cross sections of the fill and compensatory storage areas. So the cross section of the fill areas, I basically drew the existing ground and I drew how the septic system will look when it's over the floodplain area. So I've got a horizontal line on that cross-section line, which is the 235/25, the 100-year floodplain. So the only real work that we're doing, that we're filling in the floodplain area is fill area 1, which is the back. So on that cross-section, the rear lot line is shown kind of with a 0, 0, 20. Those numbers are just distances from the back of the lot line because I had to, come up with the spot elevations to get through the area that you want to look at. So fill area 1 is a small area as we come from the back of the lot, and then fill area 2 is another small area at the front of the lot, which coincides with the existing and proposed grades on the plans. So although it looks like there's a big mound to fill For the septic system, it's really going from an existing grade of like 235.8 to a proposed grade of 236.6. So it is about roughly a foot, a little more than a foot of fill that we need to make the septic system work. And then on the left side of that same page, that new drawing, is the cross section of the compensatory area, which is at the back of the property. So on that cross section, I'm showing that we want to take the existing grades of just under 230, around 235.5 or something, and drop them to 234 to create a compensatory storage. And when I actually drew on the underneath the cross section, I put how we got the volumes, how we came up with the volumes. And that volume for the compensatory area is a little bit smaller than what I had listed in notice of intent, but it's still more than the fill area. So in a nutshell, in order to build a septic system, we're filling about 1,080 cubic feet, and we're compensatory with about 1,182 square feet. So when I break those down in cubic yards, those are about at 18 yards on a truckload. There's a little more than 2 truckloads that we need to bring in, or that will be filling in the floodplain. And then, approximately 2.5 truckloads that we're going to compensatory, a little bit more. So I'm hoping that clarifies. And I think Brad couldn't find maybe the mailing information that I had, the receipts that I had sent over previously. I forget who was doing that, the town planner, right? Jim, maybe Jim was doing that, handling that paperwork. But yeah, I sent over the receipts, and I only got a few of the cards back, but normally I bring those to a meeting, whatever. So I can drop those off if you want them. And I just told Fernando tonight that he's got to pay that bill for the advertising, so he's okay with that. So I think it's a good time to see if there's any other questions that Brad or anybody else might have regarding this proposal for the construct a septic system for this house.
All right. Thanks, Bob.
Yep.
Brad?
Thanks, Tom. Yes, I do have some questions. Bob, you able to pull the plan up?
On my computer, no. Normally it's pulled up on the on conservation side. You have it there. You have my email there. I don't really know how to pull it up and then stay in the meeting. Let's see. I do have the email of it. Oh, there we go.
Brad brought it up. Okay, thanks.
That's perfect. Yep.
So I asked you to add some spot shots for the existing and proposed grading. Did you add that to the plan?
There's one in the back on the existing side. There really isn't a lot of elevation once we get away from that 235 contour on the existing. There's like tenths of a foot of changes in elevation. As you can see, the 235 contour, which is just to the north of the test pits. But those elevations are all shot with a GPS satellite instrument.
Okay, if I'm looking at the plan sheet, so to the left here, are these spot grades here? Is that existing?
Those are existing,
shot?
correct. Those are existing spot
Okay.
elevations from the satellite shots, correct.
All right. So I guess couple of things. So when let me just see if I can. It's hard having both of these open. Well, let's start with the existing plan view sheet. So these existing elevation grades are actually lower than the 234. So there should be an existing 234 contour in here somewhere. But you're not showing an existing one until
What,
you've got.
let me look at that plan. The top of the wall. I think I think it's 234.8. I'm sorry. The top of the wall is those spot elevations 234.80. I think I mislabeled the 233 because they're on a layer that when I shut off all the other spots, I had to type them in. That spot elevation is mislabeled on the existing. That's 234.80. That's how I'm scooping out the dirt to get to the 234. That one's mislabeled. I'm sorry. I think I did that yesterday morning. So the wall, I know you wanted to see more spot, but that wall is basically half up and half down. It's like 2 blocks high. So the elevations for that like the average elevation, just like one spot elevation in the middle. That wall needs to come out in order to make this backyard compensatory. So
Okay.
if I was to, and I can give you the GPS shots if you need them, but
Well, let
that
me
spot,
just, Bob, if you don't mind, let me just finish my train of thought here, please. And then if you want to add something at the end of it, go ahead.
okay,
But so I had concerns with the existing spot grades and whether or not the existing topo was shown correctly, because when I looked at the proposed grading, what it would actually show is that instead of compensatory, you're actually creating a fill situation. And so this line here, if you kind of follow my cursor, that's where your
yep,
cross section is being done. That's on the
correct,
other sheet that I'll pull up.
yep,
So, and what I want everyone to look closely at is this 235 right here, kind of in the cursor, if you can follow where that's moving, that intersects the proposed and existing 235 at that point. But when I look at the proposed compensatory profile, so there's never an intersection at 235. What you're shown is a cut going from the foundation all the way back to roughly that 234. So something in that sectional view is not correct. So I'm really having a hard time here trying to figure out whether or not you really are meeting the volume requirements for the compensatory for what you're actually filling. You mentioned there's some numbers that might be off in the existing spot grades, but even on the design side, on the proposed, you're showing intersecting contours of proposed and existing about 22, 23 feet from the foundation, which would be out, here somewhere, and clearly they're not. The existing and the proposed are quite different at that point. So I think you've got a little bit more detail there to kind of to iron out and show that you are meeting the volume requirements.
yeah. So Brad, if I go to the actual cross section of the compensatory, I've got an existing grade and a proposed grade at 20 feet and at 40 feet. Oh, you're saying my polyline is not hitting the 235 at the correct spot. 230, I got 235.10. Well, that's because I got 234.70 at the 40-foot line. Those are the correct numbers. Those came off the spot elevations. So I may have typed two elevations incorrect, but these are the elevations in the backyard. So 234
Okay.
proposed at 20 feet, 234.7. So I'm really trying to regrade that backyard to do what's required by the Conservation Commission. So 234.25, I'm right at the floodplain elevation at the foundation. With that proposed the polyline that's showing the proposed ground. The arrow's not quite hitting it, but that's the picture of it, let's say. And the volumes, I'm using an average an average area that volume that I'm taking out 7 inches. So that's how we look at the cross section. That's how I got the cross section basically. But so I must have just mistyped those two numbers.
Okay, well, I think you need to show it so that, what's on existing matches what's on proposed. And, just, again, we can talk about it, but until I see it on paper and have a clear view about it, I'm not comfortable saying that it meets the performance standards.
Well, I disagree. It's basically what the best he can do. Basically, the best that the applicant can do to regrade that backyard. I think. I mean, he'll take out more dirt, but if you ask him to, but I think that 100% he's meeting the standards. And I think that in actuality, I think that this is such a small fill area that the commission could waive that requirement for compensatory, but I could be wrong. I could be wrong on that. So I'll have to leave it up to the commission as to, whether they want more spot elevations or whatever they would like to do.
Right, thanks, Brad. Thanks, Bob. So I'm looking at the section and the proposed plan, and I think I see what Brad is complaining about. And I don't think Brad is saying that it doesn't meet the standards. Brad is saying that based on what's drawn on the plan, it's not clear that it meets the standards. So if I look at, so I look at the plot plan on the left, the existing conditions, those spot elevations, if those are 234.80 and 234.90, the plan makes a lot more sense. They're clearly the spot elevations are incorrect. I agree with Bob's assessment that those are probably typos since they lie between the 234 and 235 contours. So they're clearly not in the 233 range, or the contours are wrong. So I don't know which of those two is the answer, but one of those is wrong. Now, when I look at the proposed condition, I think it would be helpful, Bob, if on the section it was a little more clear how the section intersects the proposed grades, like if those could be called out in distances and shown on the plan. I don't think that it's, so if I go back to the sections, I'm looking at the sections.
Put the 20-foot line and the 40-foot line on that section line, you mean?
Yeah, so because they're not intersecting on the section plan, they're not intersecting with a contour line, and those 40-foot and 20-foot distances are not shown on the plan. I can see Brad's point. It's hard to line those up and map them to what you've drawn. I'm willing to take you at face value that you've done the compensation, but I agree with Brad that it's not clear from your drawings that the math works out. So I think a couple of updates to the drawings to put those things together and make it clear. I don't know, Brad, does that make sense to you? Is that a path forward?
No, it makes sense to me, because clearly the profile doesn't match the plan view, and that's what it really needs to do.
Okay, so what we'll do is I'll put a 20-foot, maybe I'll just take that plan view and pop it above the cross-section area so you can see where each spot elevation is. And I'm 100% sure that I was rushing to do that Sunday, Mother's Day. I was rushing to do that so Brad would have it for Monday. So I'm 100% sure I typed those numbers wrong. But I'll go back and look at the GPS shots. So the other questions that Brad had, so if I was to adjust that and prove the compensatory error, the commission would be, can we take a consensus of the commission? There was a question that Brad had on our recharge thing for the sump pump. I cannot put a overflow, Brad. You agree with me on that, right? You there, Brad?
So, yep. So I honestly, Bob, with trying to get through the grading part, I didn't look at your grades down there. You need
Okay.
some kind of relief. So
Well,
if you can't,
what I did is I put an
yeah.
open grade catch basin structure on it. So if it did rise up, it would just flow into the backyard, which is what it's doing now. So I think that makes the best sense for that. I just wanted to be sure. I know you didn't have a lot of time to look at it because I sent it yesterday. But
Okay, if that's the approach, just make sure you've got kind of a detail for what that framing grate looks like.
okay, yep.
Otherwise you might have a contractor put in a $2 piece of plastic thing that's going to break an hour after it's installed.
No, okay, yep. That's fair. Let's see. So some of the paperwork I cleaned up. I'll fire these. I'll update these this profile thing and ship that off to DEP so they have it as well. Does everybody understand that how we're doing that compensatory and where we're filling, underneath that floodplain area, the commission wise?
Commissioners, do you have any comments or questions? Just a side note, Dennis did join the meeting at 7:06.
Okay.
Go ahead, Bruce.
Yeah, as long as, it sounds like you were, kind of trying to rush and get that through and, a couple of the numbers were off a little bit, but as long as all the numbers match up and it shows the compensatory storage, then I'm good with it.
Okay.
I agree with Bruce. Apologize for being late. I had our next meeting's invite pulled up, so on now.
Yeah, I'm there too.
Okay, thanks. So Brad, I think
But where,
so long as you're satisfied with what Bob has said and pending updates to the plan, I think we're probably good. Is that a accurate statement?
I think
Yeah, again, it's hard to say without certainty.
Sure. Yep,
Until I
understood.
so where I'm really hung up is the proposed grading part. I understand if there might be a mislabel on the spot shots, but the proposed grading is kind of what it's shown all along. And there's some disconnect between the profile and the plan view there. So as long as that gets cleared up and they match and it shows that the volumes are fine, then it should be fine.
Okay, I'll get that new plan, the cross-section plan, updated a little quicker this time, so Brad's got a little more time to look at it. And then hopefully I can chat with him before the meeting, is it next meeting, June 11th?
Next meeting's May 28th.
Oh, May 28th, okay. All right, let me get this cross-section plan updated as quickly as possible, so Brad's got a little more time to review it. And I'll get a detail for that frame and cover on there. And hopefully we'll be good to go. So
Okay.
do we need to ask for an extension, or does the commission normally?
Yes, you need
take
to
that
ask.
vote? We would ask for an extension until the May 28th meeting, if that's agreeable to the commission.
I'll
Sure.
make a motion for continuance to the May 28th meeting.
I'll second.
All right, motion's been made by Bruce, seconded by Dennis, to continue to May 28th. Any further discussion? This will be a roll call vote. Bruce McGregor.
Aye.
Jim LaValle.
Aye.
Dennis Hubbard.
Aye.
Tom Seidenberg also votes aye. Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you all.
Right, next up on the agenda, we have a continued notice of intent for McGovern Boulevard Extension. I'm not sure
So,
who might,
Mr. Chairman,
Yep.
they did request an extension to that one yesterday, I believe, to the next meeting.
okay. Happy to take that motion.
Sure, I'll move that we continue this to 28 May.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, so motion's been made by Jim, seconded by Dennis to continue to May 28th. Any further discussion? Seeing none, this will be a roll call vote. Bruce McGregor.
Aye.
Jim LaValle,
Aye.
Dennis Hubbard,
Aye.
Tom Seidenberg also votes aye. Okay, next up, we have a request for determination of applicability for 155 Ponacan Road. Let me read the notice into the record if I can find it. There it is. Right, Town of Lancaster Conservation Commission Notice of Public Hearing, May 14th, 2024. Pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 131, Section 40, the Wetlands Protection Act, and the Lancaster Wetlands Protection Bylaw, the Town of Lancaster Conservation Commission will hold a public hearing via Zoom on Tuesday, May 14th, 2024 at 7 p.m. to hear and act upon the following matter. A request for determination of applicability filed by David Brahman, 155 Ponacan Road, Lancaster, Mass, relative to the replacement of a subsurface sewage disposal system. The property is located at 155 Ponacan Road, Lancaster, Mass, and is identified as Assessor's Map 25, Parcel 27. A copy of the application and accompanying documents are on file in the Office of Community Development and Planning, 701 Main Street, Lancaster, Mass, 978-365-3326, extension 1059. Great. Who do we have online? Matt?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Matt Morrow, representing 155 Ponacan Road. If I can share my screen.
Please do.
Let's see what we got. Oh, just want to make sure I get the right one. Nope. Sorry, looks like that's the wrong one. Just bear with me for 1 second. It's not showing properly. I don't know why. Apologies, I can't seem to find it on my sharing portion of the app. I'm not sure why. Let me just close out some windows and see if that helps.
Sure.
Okay, here we go. Can you see that okay?
Yep, we can see it. Thanks.
Okay. Sorry about the technical difficulty. So what we have is 155 Ponacan Road is an existing single-family 3-bedroom home. On Ponacan Road on the corner, just before you hit the Nashua River, which would be down here. The bordering vegetated wetland that borders the Nashua River here is almost identical to the high water mark. I actually might be a little bit more conservative based on the plan. So essentially you would have the 100-foot Nashua River setback here, which coincides with the buffer zone. The entirety of the lot is actually within the riverfront. We have essentially an existing subsurface sewage disposal system. The old leach field is outlined here, and the old tankage is outlined here. So what we're looking to do is to install a new force main, new tanks, and a new leach field. We tucked it as far away as we possibly could. We have an existing very large tree here, greater than a 12-inch diameter. that tree is slated to remain in place. That's basically it. It's fairly simple and straightforward. It is on existing lawn, and existing lawn it shall remain. We have precautionary erosion protection put out over here just in case it is needed. The lot is fairly flat. So, it's very far away from the top of the edge of slope behind the tree line that will go down to the river. So don't see like a real potential for an erosion hazard here. Other than that, that's really it. It's very simple.
Great, thank you, Mr. Merrill. Brad?
So it does seem to be a pretty straightforward project. I know I'm in my second meeting with the commission now. This is probably about where my threshold limit would be for recommending a negative determination. A lot of times, septics and things of that nature can have a lot of grading and potential for runoff. This particular one does not. It is all lawn. The grade is pretty subtle back there. I would point out though, the 86 feet dimension from the wetland flag, that's just to a portion of the leach field itself, it appears. So there is a limit of work that's closer to that resource area, if that matters to the commission. And that would simply be for grading and construction vehicle access, things of that nature. So that line that has the number 6, I believe that denotes the erosion control barrier. It runs perpendicular, and that dark shaded line that runs perpendicular and touches the property line exactly. So that's really where the proposed activity limit is, and you could expect that there will be some disturbance going up close to it. But even if that were the case, it's a pretty minor project in my mind. I don't know where the commission's been in the past with these types of upgrades for the septic, if they're okay with the negative or if they want a notice of intent. But for this particular scenario, I'd be comfortable with a negative determination.
Commissioners, comments, questions? Go ahead, Jim.
Thank you. Mr. Morrow, could you point out for me, please, once more, where are the erosion controls?
Right here.
That's that heavy dark line. Okay. All right. One more question. How long do you think this work will take?
Usually an installation like this takes inside of about a week.
Yeah, pretty short, right?
Yeah, it's very short. I mean, the only thing that might delay this would be weather. I think on my RDA narratives, I usually put 2 weeks, just to be on the safe side, but it's usually about a week.
Okay. Do you make any effort to pick a week that, no weather is predicted? So no big rainstorm is coming, or is that not feasible?
Well, I mean, yeah, that's normally how they would try to plan it out.
It is. Okay.
I believe if I probably would be corrected, but I think Curtis is actually installing this one. Not sure, but I know most of the installers that Mr. Carloni deals with, usually they don't want to do it in the middle of a rainstorm.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have.
Any other commissioners, comments? Go ahead, Bruce.
I think this is a pretty simple one, and I think it meets all the requirements, and so I'm good with it.
Thanks, Bruce. Any further comments or questions from the commission?
No need to pile on. I'm in line with Bruce and Jim.
Okay, it sounds like you guys are fine with the negative, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, any comments or questions from the general public? I'm not seeing any, so I'd be happy to, if there's no further questions, I'd be happy to take a motion to issue a negative determination. If the
I'll
board,
make a motion for a negative determination, issue a negative determination on this property.
I'll second.
all right, motion's been made by Bruce and seconded by Dennis to issue a negative determination. Any further discussion? Seeing none, this will be a roll call vote. Bruce McGregor.
Aye.
Jim LaValle,
Aye.
Dennis Hubbard,
Aye.
Thomas Seidenberg also votes aye. Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, guys.
Just write some notes. Okay. Next up on our agenda, we have a request for determination of applicability for 0 Fire Road 4, the town beach. Let me read the notice into the record. Town of Lancaster Conservation Commission, notice of public hearing, May 14th, 2024. Pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 131, Section 40, the Wetlands Protection Act, and the Lancaster Wetlands Protection Bylaw, the Town of Lancaster Conservation Commission will hold a public hearing via Zoom on Tuesday, May 14th, 2024 at 7 p.m. to hear and act upon the following matter. A request for determination of applicability filed by the Town of Lancaster, care of Kelly Dolan, 701 Main Street, Lancaster, Mass, relative to the repair and addition of sand to the Lancaster Town Beach. The property is located at 0 Fire Road 4, Lancaster, Mass, and is identified as Assessor's Map 10, Parcel 9. A copy of the application and accompanying documents are on file in the Office of Community Development and Planning, 701 Main Street, Lancaster, Mass, 978-365-3326, extension 1059. Do we have someone online to talk about this for the town? Don't see.
Mr. Chairman,
Yep.
so Ms. Dolan did mention that she would be unable to attend this evening. I'm familiar with the project. I did speak with her. I also spoke with our DPW staff. The DPW is actually the the department that would do the work as well.
Mhm.
They directed Ms. Dolan's office to actually file with the commission, so that was very helpful. But what they would essentially like to do, and I'll just pull some photos up and share my screen. Okay, so there's the beach there. Can you see that?
Yep, we can see it. Thanks, Brad.
So my understanding is, and this isn't an annual occurrence where they want to maintain the beach every year. You can see from the photo there's a little bit of a rill that has formed from the woodland area, and it's made its way down to the beach. And it's something that they basically want to repair and kind of groom over. We did receive comments from DEP on this particular application. You know, they had some concerns about whether or not it would warrant filing a notice of intent. You know, if, for instance, you would have, you know, continual washouts of sand getting into the pond. My understanding is that's not the case. Certainly, this type of damage would happen again, but it's not something that's necessarily even on an annual basis. While I was out there, I did happen to take a peek anyway, before the application was even filed, just to see what type of a more permanent fix could be done behind the building that you can see in the top left of the top photo. There's what could be an isolated wetland adjacent to the parking area. So some of that may be filling up and then overflowing into this spot. But additionally, there's quite a significant slope heading up into the woodland, and that's all funneling down to that real location as well. And it doesn't seem like there's an easy way to correct the erosion there, simply because of the location and the recreation feasibility of that portion of it. You know, ideally you want to, you know, work at the low point and make your permanent fix and stop any more movement of material to keep that portion of the beach more usable, and, you know, relay that water path to the side somewhere would take some significant regrading. And, without doing further investigation of what that wetland may or may not be behind the building too, would trigger additional permitting as well. So my thoughts on this, as the agent and also, from a town employee perspective, is to entertain this one-time fix. Bring in about 6 yards of material, groom the area, try to make it workable for this summer's recreation season. And if we happen to see, yes, all of a sudden it eroded again in a month, or, by the end of the summer, or something that looks like it's going to happen on a more regular basis, then maybe the town needs to take the approach of looking at it in more detail before the commission would then say, sure, go ahead and continue to keep bringing sand on here, because you certainly don't want to keep importing material and have that fill up the land underwater body underneath the pond there.
Okay, thanks, Brad. Commissioners, questions or comments? Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, just one comment. So I've been on the commission for quite a long time now, and I don't recall this ever coming before the commission before. So in 10 years in Lancaster, I can't recall sand being replaced at this beach once. So that would tell me that it is infrequent. It's my only comment.
Thanks, Jim. I guess my only response to that, Jim, would be, would they have asked? I don't know. I don't know how. Yeah.
I'm with you.
Bruce, go ahead.
That's a good point, Tom. So, hopefully they would have asked in the past, but no, it's a area that they're familiar with what happens, and it sounds like this is something that's a newer occurrence, and I agree with Brad. Let's allow this fix once, and then if for some reason it we see this happening again, then we're going to need a bigger fix. But also land over time changes too. It could be something where there was never an issue, and now fast forward to today, and now will this become a perpetual issue? We really won't know until we have them fix it. I think we should have them fix it, and then we'll just kind of watch it, and if it comes back again. But as Jim had mentioned, they haven't brought this before us before, so I'm sure they're familiar with the area if this has happened before.
Dennis, go ahead.
Yeah, although I don't have a problem with the work in general, just kind of the watch it and see, like, how do we make sure that happens, right? So that's where I'd almost rather have this. It is jurisdictional, do an NOI, and then put some conditions around the monitoring around it so that we can make sure we can get an early signal if it starts washing into the resource area again, so that we can step up and get ahead of it instead of dumping 6 more yards that could wash right back into the pond. I think this clearly falls under the Wetlands Act. So I have a hard time as a NDA. NOI, excuse me.
Thanks, Dennis. Yeah, so Brad, I guess I'm on the fence on this one. I understand. It seems like this hasn't been an issue, a long-term issue, that this is the first time. I've been on the commission less than Jim, but this is also the first time I've heard of needing to do work on the town beach coming before the commission. So, assuming everybody was following the rules, that would be, once out of 6 years. I would probably be comfortable with a one-off, but on the other hand, I tend to agree with Dennis that this does seem like this should be an NOI, and more so because it gives us an opportunity to come back and check because of the process of an actual order of conditions. So confirm if I'm wrong, Brad, but there's really no mechanism if we issue a negative determination, even with conditions, there's really no mechanism in that process for following up. Because it's not that kind of process. You don't have to come back and ask us for a certificate of compliance. It's just we said, no, you don't need to file an NOI. I know we can put conditions on a negative determination, but I don't know, if I assume that staff turnover doesn't continue like it has for the last 4 or 5 years, then I'm actually comfortable with saying there's people in town hall who will remember this and will be checking up on it. But over the last 5 years, that hasn't been the case. There's been a lot of turnover. I feel like we have, other than, no, I guess I can't say other than your role, right? Because you're new and Brian's also new, but town manager's been sticking, so that seems to be good. She's been 2 or 3 years now. I think Kelly Dolan's been with us for a few years now, so I do have a little bit of a comfort level that we've started to mitigate the staff turnover. I don't know. So I've rambled there for a bit, Brad. What do you think about those concerns?
Couple of comments, if I may. To your concerns, Tom, that you mentioned early on in your questioning, did they know to ask in the past? Well, the gentleman from the DPW that pointed to Kelly to file with the Conservation Commission, my understanding is he's been in town for years.
It was the former superintendent. Okay, yeah. Okay, good.
So that the knowledge has been there, at least on their end. So I don't want to ever assume anything, but presumably if it needed it last year, the year before then, having somebody who's been in town for a while with institutional knowledge, if they're directing to the commission now, they would have done so a few years ago or less, for instance. The other part, the town staff that's been working with this, we all want to do it right. Myself, Kelly, I'm sure, the DPW, we don't want to cause problems for the town. We work for the town. We want to see things done correctly. If the commission's comfortable with issuing a negative, I personally wouldn't have the problem with conditioning that negative determination that this is a one-time repair. So it wouldn't be a negative for 3 years, for instance, which is what your typical determination of applicability would be, to just go ahead and make the repair work as frequent as often as they'd like. I have my own concerns about this, not having been here in town long enough to, how often is this happening? So I would be more comfortable on my own end to condition this as a one-time fix, in a negative determination as a condition. And then if we see it happens again before the year is over, then I need to speak with my colleagues about doing some more formal permitting. Or if we do this fix and there's the tiniest little rill that doesn't even need work for the next 3 years, well, maybe the commission might be comfortable doing another negative determination after 3 years. Who knows? But I see the commission's concern on this, and I would think that if you have concerns, that's one way of handling it is just to do it a one-time opportunity and not something that you can do at will for 3 years.
All right. Thanks, Brad. So I'm going to stay with the commission. Kathy Hughes, I see your hand raised. I'll get to you, but I'm going to stay with the commission right now. Jim LaValle, go ahead.
Yep, thank you. So Brad, thank you for that option. I didn't think of it. I think that is a reasonable path forward. This is work within the buffer zone. Am I correct? I'm looking at the bylaw now. Am I correct that this is not an alteration?
Are you asking me this question?
I am. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
So that's further on the agenda, actually.
Yeah.
That's something I need some guidance from the commission on for a variety of reasons. But I guess in a quick nutshell, the way I read the bylaw is that the buffer zone itself is a is a resource area. And any movement of material traditionally under the Wetlands Protection Act, for instance, has been determined a alteration. So any resource area impact, to clarify, where you've got a discharge or a movement of material, is really the way that's always been interpreted, is that's altering.
Okay.
But it really depends on how the commission weighs said alterations, and is it actually impacting a wetland resource area versus what's traditionally, buffer zone under WPA that may not impact a wetland area, if that makes sense.
So in the bylaw, it talks about altering the elevation, but we are not altering the elevation, I don't believe. Okay, so I'm good. I thank you for the option with the RDA.
Thanks, Jim. Go ahead, Bruce.
Plus, it's also, it's fill. So the fact that it's fill within a resource area. But I do like that other option, Brad, that you mentioned about, the one time fix. I do like that as an option.
I guess my comment to your question, Jim, I would call it an alteration. I mean, it is fill. And so it is in fact raising elevation, at least of the rill.
Yeah, okay. That's the kicker, right? Because it says placing of fill or removal of material which would alter elevation.
Yeah.
And this apparently does. Okay.
But I guess I would also be fine if the rest of the commission was fine with saying this was a one-time negative. That the condition is any further addressing of erosion on the beach would definitely be an NOI. Obviously, we can't bind a future commission to the same decision we make today, but I would be fine with doing it as a one-off. I think Dennis was pretty strong in advocate against a positive determination. I don't know, Dennis, if that swayed your opinion.
If we can condition this I as a one time and put some other conditions on it, I think I'm okay. I wasn't aware that we could condition it. So I think if we could do that, it's 6 yards. So it's relatively minor.
Okay, thanks, Dennis. Kathy Hughes, you've waited patiently. Go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to make sure I got in. My name is Kathy Hughes, 80 Fire Road 11. And thank you for letting me speak. I'm actually speaking not only as a private resident, but also we have a Spec Pond Preservation Association, and it's made up of members of the local community. And our focus is on the water quality and managing the water quality in the pond. While this is a really precious resource, not only for those of us who live near it, but for the whole town. And we're always thrilled to see so many town people use the facility there. I can tell you exactly where that water came from. A lot of it is a wetland area. It's runoff from the roads, and specifically runoff from Route 2, I think, comes over into it. And this year with all the rain, that was absolutely flowing down to the beach this year. And there's no doubt that something needs to be done. Our concern is that bringing something like sand in can cause permanent damage to the pond itself. I think if we were to look at Massachusetts Department of Conservation and Recreation Lakes and Pond Program on page 37 says, do not add sand to your beach area. It introduces sources of sediments and phosphorus. Phosphorus is particularly a worry for us. We have already had blue-green algae, or the cyanide bacteria algae, in the Little Speck a couple years ago. It has also been in Fort Pond more recently. It is something that is a big concern for the area. As many of you, I'm sure, know, this is a deadly algae. It kills animals. It can cause serious damage to people who swim in the water. And when I say serious, I'm talking Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and ALS, that type of thing. So it is a big worry that sand brought in could have phosphorus in it. Also, it can have invasive species in it. It can also have PFAS in it. PFAS is another huge worry that we have. A Little Speck has extremely high elevations of PFAS in the water right now, and we're trying to locate where that's coming from. We're narrowing it down to runoff from Route 70, which could be the soccer fields. We're not sure. We're trying to zero in on that. This is a committee this is an association where members pay a small dues, and we're doing all that water testing ourselves. We've had very little support from the town when it comes to this type of thing. And we've also had very little support from the rec department when we have asked them to put up signs to any kind of boats or flotation devices going into the water to ask them to wash it before it goes into the water so it doesn't bring those invasive species in. I would ask that the commission, not that you don't repair the beach, but that you're very, we take some time to be very concerned about what we're bringing into the area. I don't know, I've heard triple wash sand. I don't really know much about sand myself. I don't know if that prevents phosphorus or algae or invasive species from coming in, but I would really ask you to be very careful about what you agree to when you bring in products that are going to naturally flow into the water, because that is the rainwater that pushed all of that sediment in so already, and I'm concerned that there'll be more to it. We do regular water testing, not I should say annual water testing, although we've been testing more regularly for PFAS because that has been a concern. PFAS testing is expensive. It's $415 each time you have a sample tested. So it's not something we can afford to do more often, but it is a very big worry, and the same with the cyanide bacteria. So anyway, I hope that just want to say our piece on this. It is a concern. So I would really ask that the commission take this very seriously and think about what type of material they're going to allow to be near the beach that will get into the ponds. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. So Brad, I don't know if you've had experience with beach nourishment in the past. Do you think that we can craft an appropriate condition to specify what kind of sand can be used, that we can, ameliorate some of these concerns about what's in the sand?
Let me just share my screen again briefly, if I may.
Sure.
And I just wanted to show the commission the particular photo again, a little bit zoomed in. So I have done some lakes and pond management. Not a lot of beach work, very little beach work, to be frank. Quite a bit of aquatic vegetation control by means of drawdowns, herbicide treatment, things of that nature. And in terms of phosphorus, I'd have to go back to the literature, but from the stormwater point of view, as well as the lake point of view, the phosphorus really comes more from organic material, not so much from sand. Sand is granular in nature. It doesn't really have that much in it unless it's collecting it from another source somewhere. So if something in the watershed is running down to the beach, you might find, the material there has phosphorus in it. One of the things that's actually an option should a community or a private pond owner have deep pockets, ponds, for instance, that get a silty bottom, and because of those organics that are high in nutrients like phosphorus, the weeds take off. One thing that's actually been done in places is what they call reverse layering, where they'll put mechanical equipment into the pond itself, basically suck the sand and gravel from below that silt layer, spread it like you would see a water sprinkler circling, for instance, and they take that sand material from underneath, put it back on the bottom of the pond so that the weeds don't have that nutrient-rich layer to grow. So I'm not convinced that sand necessarily is a problem. When I look at this particular photo, what I see is the sand, the material that is there is being washed away, and you may be exposing some of the organic below it. I don't know the history of this beach. I don't really know what's there, but I can certainly see that, there's a little bit more organic in the rill than what I'm seeing, on the surface in other areas. So just taking care of the rill itself may keep some of the nutrient laden material there from washing into the pond. I would have to, I should have thought about this a little bit more ahead of time, but I do believe that we have a gravel pit here in town. At least that's what I'm told. I can check out and see if they have any records in terms of a sieve analysis, what's been hauled out of there, or what they have the capability of in terms of taking out the smaller particles as you get down into the clay range area. Well, silts and clays are really what you don't want in there for this. So if you are just getting sand and gravel sized particles, and we know that the source doesn't have a history of contamination, then I would not have any issues with placing that material here. I just can't answer that for the commission tonight.
Okay, thanks, Brad. Mr. Christopher, I see your hand raised. Go ahead.
Good evening, Commissioners. Tom Christopher, 139 Harvard Street in Fitchburg, Massachusetts. Just like to offer a quick walk down memory lane for the commission. You probably recall it was about a year and a half, I guess maybe 2 years ago, that we had a project on Fort Pond that was at the YMCA facility, and they had been in front of us to reconstruct the wall, and I believe that was completed last year. And part of that reconstruction process was the replenishment of the beach sand that similar to what has been occurring on the Lancaster Town Beach was also occurring because of the collapse of the existing stone wall. Going back, I'm going to say maybe 3 years now, we had a discussion as a commission about this, and we brought up the subject of beach replenishment. And I don't recall if it was myself or our former agent, Mr. Kuntz, that did some homework and came up with some standards that are covered under Chapter 91 waterways relative to beach replenishment. Sadly, most of those standards apply to ocean beaches, but certainly there are elements of those standards that I thought we had incorporated into somewhat of an abbreviated policy for the commission. And relative to that, when the YMCA was in front of the commission a while back, I think that we had discussed bringing in septic sand that had been washed and the organics had been pulled out of it. The fact that Ms. Hughes talked about double washing certainly would certainly be an added advantage for sure. Getting back to Mr. Stone's talk about the sand and gravel location that is the town pit. I am intimately familiar with town pit and the adjacent gravel pit that we've been doing restoration work on now for about 12 years. And I can honestly say that is some of the finest material I've seen all across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. It is septic grade quality without washing. It is outstanding material. And if that was going to be the source of the beach replenishment, I certainly would certainly want to reinforce that use. Also, what Ms. Hughes was talking about on the cyanobacteria, last year in early spring, we did have a second occurrence of cyanobacteria on Little Speck Pond, and that was coming down basically, I'll call it an intermittent brook, but the intermittent brook is fed by a culvert that passes under Route 70, and there is a drain structure located in the drainage swale for the soccer fields that leads directly into that intermittent brook. And that was the last time that I saw cyanobacteria there, and that would be early spring 2023. The occurrence that we had on Fort Pond was in the fall of 2024, and that was really only in one location on the Hooper property, which also had a sand beach with a lot of leaf debris that had accumulated on the water's edge, and certainly with some of the warmer weather that we had back in 2023. Obviously, the temperature had quite a bit to do with the rise of the cyanobacteria. So that's the walk down memory lane. Happy to answer any questions if commission members or if Mr. Stone has any questions.
Thanks, Tom. Commissioners, Brad, any further comments or questions?
I don't have any, thank you.
So I'm actually of two minds. So Ms. Hughes' concerns, I do hear them. I think that either we need to understand better what the sand will be, or we need to be able to condition it appropriately to specify what we are willing to accept. Brad, if you think that we can craft a negative determination that addresses some of those concerns, I'd be fine going that route. Otherwise, I actually might now be inclined to do a positive determination so that we can put all those details, do an appropriate research and put all those details on paper. So I don't know, commissioners, how you feel about that, or Brad, if you think that that's a viable path forward. Jim, go ahead.
So Tom, maybe you already said this, but there's one option to just take this off the table for tonight. Brad can do a little more research and we'll look at it again next meeting.
Also fine, sure.
Yeah, I think for me that's a good way.
Yeah, I'd want to see those conditions applied, whether it's through an NOI or as a one-time. But I can't see myself voting for it without those conditions in place on specifying sand type.
Yeah.
So what's the process we go about getting that? I'm more flexible, but if we table this and then come back, if we think we can find out how to condition it in that amount of time, then that works.
Go ahead, Bruce.
Maybe we can also, there was nobody here. I know, Kelly couldn't make it tonight and the DPW wasn't here, but maybe also if we can hear from somebody of what they were planning on doing, maybe they were going to bring in triple wash sand or something like that, So I think if somebody from the town was to show up at the next meeting and explain what their plan was, maybe they did have a good plan in place. The first thing is I really appreciate Kathy coming on and educating us on this. This is something that I'm not familiar with, and so I'm going to study up on a little bit more. I think it's important to that we make sure to do this right and that doesn't affect Spec Pond. But I think Jim makes a good point. Let's go this to the next meeting. In the meantime, maybe someone from the town can come back on and explain what their plans are. If their plans are something that alleviates a lot of the concerns that Kathy brought up, then I think that would work out better.
Thanks, Bruce. So Brad, I think we're probably about to vote to continue this. If you can gather what additional information you can get whether we need to have someone else from DPW or whether you can get the information and bring it forward to us next meeting. I think just a little bit more details or understanding about what we'd be agreeing to. I think we probably would then be looking at a negative determination with conditions, but it sounds like the board wants to understand what those conditions would look like. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's very reasonable. And if you need me to formally request a continuance on behalf of the town, I'd be happy to do so.
Okay, thanks. So we have a request to continue to May 28th. Can we have a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we continue to May 28th.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, motion's been made by Jim and seconded by Dennis to continue to May 28th. Any further discussion? Seeing none, this will be a roll call vote. Bruce McGregor.
Aye.
Jim LaValle,
Aye.
Dennis Hubbard,
Aye.
Tom Seidenberg also votes aye. Great. Thank you. Next, let's see. Okay, that completes the public hearings. On to discussion. First item is a request for certificate of compliance for 204 Fire Road 3. Did everyone, Brad, do you want to give us an overview? I think this is an old
Sure.
one, right?
So I did spend some time looking through our files, just to learn a little bit about the history here. And, you know, what I did find was that the commission actually, the one that's being requested tonight, there was actually an order of conditions for work that was done on the same parcel that showed, existing conditions at that time, which would have been an as-built, for instance, under this particular order, should we have required one for this. So I don't see that there was anything outstanding in that particular order. And seeing that we had an updated site plan on the newer notice of intent, which ultimately received a certificate of compliance as well. There wasn't anything in my mind left outstanding on this particular one.
Okay, thanks, Brad. Commissioners, any comments or questions? If not, I'd be happy to take a motion to issue the certificate of compliance.
I'll make a motion to issue the certificate of compliance.
I'll second.
Motion's been made by Bruce and seconded by Dennis to issue the certificate of compliance. Any further discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote. Bruce McGregor.
Aye.
Jim LaValle.
Aye.
Dennis Hubbard.
Aye.
Tom Seidenberg also votes aye. Okay, next up we have a request for partial certificate of compliance for 2528 North Main Street, Lot 2. So when I looked this up, after seeing the plan, I realized that this is something that we actually already approved. So this is actually the certificate of compliance for the Bartlett Pond Dam Removal Project. The commission approved that certificate of compliance at the August 29th meeting. If my notes are correct, I also did review the meeting minutes, and it did say that we approved that certificate of compliance 3-0. So I don't know why that wasn't recorded. Brad, I think we traded emails. Brad suggested that we should simply approve it again. I assume that the current requester is going to need something for the registry of deeds, so we would need to sign a new certificate of compliance anyway. Is that basically what's going on, Brad?
If the commission's already voted and approved it, there's nothing you have to vote on tonight other than acknowledge that we do need a new original one for recording purposes. So that's in with the additional paperwork that I'll be getting to the commission at some point. That would be an extra component of it. So as long as the commission's aware and doesn't question what's this, it's already been voted on, approved, and that's how I would recommend handling it. And one other quick comment, for what it's worth, before I realized what prior project this was, the dam removal, if anybody is driven by just a little bit as you're heading east of the park there's a residential lot under construction. So there was a plan provided for that, and that's really what prompted this partial certificate. It's been subdivided since. It doesn't show up on our GIS yet, but there is a plan of record with the building department. There are wetlands delineated on that plan. There is work being proposed there for the construction of this house lot. And looking at the lot itself and looking at that plan, it appears that they are in compliance with that plan, which is great because, had they gone, another 10 feet into the woods, it probably would have been in the buffer zone and triggered Conservation Commission review. So I kind of looked at a bunch of things there just for information purposes. So if anybody questions that particular lot, as of right now, they're outside of the commission's jurisdiction.
Okay, thanks for that confirmation. I was actually curious about that myself because I have driven by that lot and noticed that it was under construction. So just to confirm, Brad, you think it would be, we should vote to confirm our previous vote? That's more or less what we should do tonight?
You could certainly handle it that way. And instead of the partial, I would recommend that the commission just issue a complete certificate of compliance as voted on in the past. And we'd give the certificate to the current applicant now so that they can go ahead and record it.
Okay, so that makes sense, and that sounds fine to me. But my follow-up question is, so this project was actually done by the town. So I'm fine with doing it, giving this landowner the certificate of compliance, but shouldn't the town also be requesting one for itself? And shouldn't we be filing it for our own self with the Registry of Deeds? I don't know if that makes any sense, but we did,
So
the town did the work, right? So that,
if I may, a couple of
Sure.
things real quick. So it's quite common that land gets subdivided after an initial order is done. So there's no reason to prohibit once that subdivision of land has taken place. If that person wants to request a partial and they happen to be different than the applicant or other landowner, then they can go ahead and do that as far as I'm concerned. That's been kind of standard industry practice. So the partial part, they can certainly do, even though it was a town order, for instance. Knowing the history that it's already been approved and issued, I don't see why the town would object to just having it reissued again. There doesn't really seem anything left for the town to do. It doesn't make sense to, issue a partial to one person and a new complete to another. You're just adding to recording fees, or, if somebody doesn't record either of them, well, now you're back to the commission again. So I feel more comfortable if there's a law firm involved that requested the certificate. I feel a lot more comfortable that you give the certificate to them, they're going to get it recorded.
okay.
Then, it's, if that makes sense.
I wasn't debating the giving them the certificate. I think that we were going to go ahead and do that. I was kind of asking a different question: is should we just record it ourselves, since it was our project? But yeah, I'm fine if we want to just give them the certificate and it gets recorded. That, yeah, in the end, that's all that really needs to happen, is that it gets recorded by somebody. So, commissioners, I'd be happy to take a motion to confirm our previous action? Or if, if Brad, if you don't even think that's necessary, just stick this COC in the bin and we'll sign it.
I'm fine with that because it's been voted on. We have record of that, and
Okay.
I did ultimately find a signed copy of it. So
Okay.
That sounds good.
It's good to me.
Then we will move on. So item number 3 on discussion, request for extension permit 314 Fort Pond Road.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Sure.
The applicant's representative is unable to make it here this evening. I got an email from him earlier this evening. The commission may recall they came in front of the commission last fall, I think, for an amended order request. And previously, before requesting the extension permit, they were entertaining doing another revised plan and reached out to me in terms of, would this change be de minimis or would it require another amended order, that kind of thing. And then ultimately, they decided that they weren't going to go through with filing for another amended order and stick to the plan that the commission approved at that time. But what I brought up during the course of that conversation is the dates on the amended order were off. So they were under the presumption that the order didn't expire until October of 2026. But when you look at when the original order was issued, the expiration of that is actually 4 days from now. So for anyone that's not aware, when orders get amended, it doesn't extend the original expiration date. So those timelines all remain intact still. And for whatever reason, when this particular one got issued, the amendment, the dates on it were treated as if it was a brand new order of conditions. So I wanted to get that corrected before this expired, and I recommended they request the extension permit and, kept their permit current and, try to prevent any confusion in the future. So that's how it arrived before the commission tonight.
Okay, I mean, that certainly makes sense to me. Granting the extension. I don't have any particular objections. I do remember the amended that we went through last fall. Commissioners, do you guys have any questions or comments? Not seeing anything.
No, I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
So Brad, let me just, sorry, go ahead, Dennis.
Just following up with Jim, I'm good.
Okay. So Brad, just to confirm, you're in favor of the commission granting an extension to the existing amended order, recognizing that the date was wrong on the paperwork.
Yes, and I would also, suggest on behalf of the commission that I just include a cover letter with that to clarify the dates. I think I may have done that with one other project already that was still valid, so there was no reason to come before the commission. But where there's been some confusion with dates on things, I've been trying to handle it that way. But my biggest fear is this one would have expired and they would have gotten into trouble.
Yep, understood. So commissioners, I'd be happy to take a motion.
I'll make a motion to grant an extension for the existing order.
So actually one comment. So Brad, under WPA, we can grant up to 3-year extension. Under bylaw, we can only grant 1-year extension, just to confirm. The letter does say 1-year extension. So that's what this vote is. Yeah.
Understood.
Okay. So Bruce,
So I
if
make-
you could just amend your motion to clarify
Yep,
that as
so
well.
I'll make a motion to grant a 1-year extension of the existing order.
I'll second.
Motion's been made by Bruce, seconded by Dennis to grant a 1-year extension to the order of conditions for 314 Fort Pond Road. Any further discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote. Bruce McGregor.
Aye.
Jim LaValle,
Aye.
Dennis Hubbard,
Aye.
Tom Seidenberg also votes aye. Okay. Thank you. So next up, Forest Legacy Program updates from town meeting. At town meeting, all of the Forest Legacy grant warrant articles were pulled. I was not aware that they were going to be pulled until they actually were pulled. Actually, so that's not true. I knew earlier that day that the Community Preservation Act project for the Forest Legacy was going to be pulled, but I wasn't aware that the warrant article for the other piece was going to be pulled. So I did have a brief conversation with Bob Lidstone immediately after the town meeting closed. And, he told me that there were some issues with the warrant articles as written. So what I'm specifically aware of, so I did know about a week and a half in advance that there was basically a typo, for lack of a better description. One of the parcel numbers was wrong, as listed in the article. By the time that was brought to light, it was too late to change the article. And then I was dropped off the email chain. I assumed that there was going to be a floor amendment or something, but I wasn't in the loop. I think that ultimately town council decided that that changing the parcel number would not have been within the four corners of the warrant article, and so it wouldn't be a valid floor amendment. And so I'm pretty sure that that's what happened, but I don't have confirmation of that. And then with regards to the CPA funding that was going to fund some of the legal work, about 3 or 4 weeks ago, there were some emails that I was CC'd on that was questioning whether we wanted to use the CPA funds to do the legal work. And there were more discussions on that I was not part of. But I think the underlying rationale for not doing it with CPA funds had to do with who ends up with a conservation restriction on those parcels. And I think there was some concern that we would need yet another party to hold the CR, that the Conservation Commission wouldn't be able to be the one to hold the CR for the work that was done funded by CPA. Now, I'm not positive that that's the reason, because again, I wasn't CC'd on these conversations. But I think that's really what happened, those two issues. So there was a mistake in the parcel number, and then there was a question as to whether or not we really wanted the town to use CPA funds to do some of that legal work. So I know, Bruce, you had asked for this to be a discussion. I don't know if that answers all of your questions.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Tom. Thank you. Yeah, it was just kind of surprising because I'm at the meeting and, kind of excited about it. And then when both of them got pushed off, it just kind of surprised me. But no, that's why I wanted to make sure that we discuss that tonight. So I appreciate you guys putting that as an agenda item and explaining it to us. I really appreciate that. And then, so the thing I'm trying to figure out, and you might not have the answer to this, for the CPA funding, and, for the Concom to not hold the CRs, is that because, we're one of the beneficiaries of CPA funding? And is there another vehicle that they'd be using for the funding um, for Concom to hold the CRs? Is that kind of what they're trying to do, or?
So yeah, so now we're going back a month and a half. I'd have to, so I'm off of my memory. I'd have to dig through my emails, but I believe that that the land trust or the National River Watershed Association was going to scrounge up the funds instead.
Okay.
But I wasn't a full participant in those conversations. There was just some question as to whether they should, but nobody actually reached out to me and told me that they weren't going to go through. Maybe they did reach out to the chair of CPA. If they reached out to Linnea didn't forward any further correspondence to me. And she probably wouldn't have been able to anyway for open meeting law reasons. So, the last time CPA met, I feel like it was 2 or 3 weeks ago. We wouldn't have had enough time to have a meeting and discuss. So I don't think that, so I wouldn't have been able to be in that loop if Linnea was in that, Linnea and Wynn were in that loop.
Yep. So it gets, that's okay. So it's going to come up again in the fall. So hopefully they can cross all the right I's and cross all the right T's and dot all the right I's to make sure that when it comes up in the fall, we can vote on it.
Yeah. So I'm sure, the Watershed Association and the Land Trust are going to be working to fix all of those things and answer all the questions to make town council satisfied. And whether we bring it up in the fall special town meeting or defer it to next year, we're probably okay. I believe that the town has 2 years to consummate all of the stuff for the legacy grant. So we're not immediately under the gun, but doing it at the fall is probably best.
Yeah. The sooner the better. You don't want to lose that funding. I think it's a great project. And if we can get it done, I think that'd be very good for our town. So thank you.
Yeah, sure. Any other questions or comments? All right, moving on. Number 5, Seven Bridge Road correspondence. Brad?
Yes, so I believe I sent the commission a copy of that. There was a letter from the town administrator that was sent out. And I think we touched base on this briefly at the last meeting as well. I do recall that we had the discussion about that particular parcel not being of great interest to the commission. But we talked in general, was the offer ever presented in a valid way? And I think that that's what that letter addresses. So I just wanted the commission to have it for their correspondence.
Great. Thanks, Brad. Commissioners, any questions on that?
No.
All right.
Nope,
Moving on.
letter made sense.
We have the letter for South Meadow Pond, invasive species management.
Yeah, so that just confirms that they're going to go ahead and do that again now that they've received the extension permit from the commission at the prior meeting.
Commissioners, any comments or questions?
Yeah, so that's just an inform, right, Brad?
Correct. I'm trying to anything that comes in to me, to the commission, I've been trying to relay that to the commission as correspondence. So actually that letter, going back to the Seven Bridge Road one, I didn't get that from the town administrator directly. I got that from somebody else that had received it. But because it went to the commission, I was giving it to you as correspondence that went to the commission. And similar here, it was sent to the commission. I don't know how often you want to see these things for updates, but at a minimum, I want to make sure that everybody's getting what I have.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate that too. Thanks. So number 7, we still have an open seat. Bruce mentioned last meeting that he would be stepping down when we filled that seat, so we'll still have an open seat. I did speak at town meeting on during one of the articles, and made a lame kind of plea for more volunteers, but I don't know that that people are chomping at the bit to join the commission, sadly. But I'm hoping. But I have not heard anything. I haven't seen any requests. No one's talked to me. Brad, I assume you haven't heard anything that letters of interest have been sent.
I actually spoke briefly with a resident at my counter, perhaps the middle of last week. Very, very brief conversation. Again, I don't know the process in terms of interviewing and appointments in town, so I didn't think it was my place to have any in-depth discussion with this particular resident. So I did give him my business card, and I he mentioned he does have email. I says, please express your interest in a brief email, send it to me, and I will forward it to the town administrator, and she can begin the process in the normal fashion she sees fit. But we did have at least somebody who knew the position was out there and was potentially interested.
That's great. Yeah, so the process is basically as you described. So generally the way it works is the request will get sent to the select board. About half of the time the select board asks the board that would be appointed to whether they want to comment, and the other half of the time they just act on the request. Since we have so many empty seats in town, I don't feel like the select board is interested in getting a no, we don't want this person back from the board. They just rather take whoever expresses interest, and I can certainly see that point of view. There's plenty of open seats in town. If anybody wants to sit on them, I think the town would be happy to have them.
Yeah, Tom, it's Jim. So, or Brad, is there a way to make this more visible on the town website?
I can certainly look into that. Traditionally, how have we gotten the message out there? Do we use social media at all, or is it just website postings? Or
so I had mentioned to Brian, when this first came up, if we could get something posted to the town Facebook page. I don't think that ever happened, but we do. The town posts all of the open seats on the town website under job opportunities, and then board openings or committee openings. I don't know what it says, but basically it's a couple links down. I mean, you have to go, you have to be looking for it to find it.
Yeah, a little hard to find.
Yeah. I certainly could post on one or two of the town adjacent Facebook pages, but honestly, I'm really not interested in posting on Facebook. I'm really only read only, and I don't really feel like wading in on Facebook because a lot of the discussions that happen on Facebook are pretty vitriolic.
Yeah, I agree. I wouldn't recommend it.
But I read them because sometimes I learn things that I find helpful. Okay, well, that's great news, Brad, and I look forward to seeing an agenda item on the select board's agenda for an appointment to the commission. All right, number 8, 397 Centerbridge Road enforcement order.
Okay, if I may, Tom,
Sure.
I think we talked a little bit about this last meeting as well. I needed some time to go through the history as well as I wanted to explore all potential avenues of enforcement through local as well as state. I think we all understood locally we're able to enforce this as well as state level DEP. My question was there anybody at DCR with the National Flood Insurance Program portion of it? Is there anything they could do for enforcement? I think it was last Friday they were able to get back to me for our second discussion that I had with them. And the quick answer for this particular case is no. It's a lot easier for the state to get involved on that side of things through their office if there's a building type scenario, floodplain violation that would really put the community in jeopardy of not being in compliance with the National Flood Insurance Program. The Lancaster may still be because of the fill itself, but it's not up to the level that DCR would step in for any type of enforcement for this if they ever go that particular route. So their advice was to continue enforcing it locally, as well as look at the DEP option. The going through the files, some of the things I've noticed, it's been going on much longer than I initially anticipated. If I am reading things correctly, at least as far back as January of 2023. And it's unclear to me whether or not the property owner actually ever got in hand an enforcement order. And that part's real important. I know the most recent one that was sent out, I've got the envelope in front of me. So it was mailed January 10th of this year, and it was returned to the town on January 27th as unclaimed. And that's something that happens with certified mail. Either people don't pick it up, or some people are nervous if something comes certified and they don't want to get it, and it comes back. I've seen that quite a bit in my municipal career. So I do have a question of, did they ever receive anything in hand? If we do kick it to DEP at some point, they're going to want to know that timeline. Well, have they just been ignoring the enforcement order? And I'd like to be able to say, excuse me, well, they received it at this date, and since then nothing's happened. It also mentions in some of the correspondence they were asked to come to a conservation commission meeting. I'll need the commission's background if that ever happened. Again, that would point to them receiving something at some point. And then I understand there was a site walk done as recently as April of this year. And maybe there's some insight what happened then, what paperwork might have exchanged on site. Just more or less some confirmed dates of acknowledgement of having received this thing, and something needs to be done. As well as I won't get into it in too much detail at the moment, but I do get some concerns with enforcement about any statute of limitations in terms of how much time we have to be actually able to enforce it once we first notice the violation. So I think the clock is ticking there. And the reason I won't get into it with too much detail is because there's a little bit of discrepancy and gray area in the law in terms of what that time frame may be. Worst case scenario, we still have time, in at least a few months, as far as I'm concerned, to get something going. But I wouldn't want anything to go beyond fall, for instance, without taking a much more firm approach, which would ultimately be not enforcement orders exchanging back and forth, but filing something in the court with the property owner should the commission deem this to be, that big of a violation worthy of that. Because, if too much time goes on, then somebody can simply claim they're exempt at that point because of the limitations. So I'd be happy to hear from anyone with a little bit more background on this than me. And I will say I'm happy to send out a new enforcement order, as well as in addition to mailing it, I think we have the option, and I can reach out to the police chief, of having it delivered by a constable, and that may get rid of the question of was this ever delivered? Did the property owner ever get it? That would have some legal standing there. DEP does that themselves. I know I've actually been out in the past with the regional director to do that type of thing, where they've gone out and hand delivered it, left it at a door when nobody's home, or hand delivered it to them when they are. And I've been a witness to that as an agent. But I think, if we're just going to do this locally, we can certainly try to work with the police department if historically they can or are willing to do that. I also wouldn't rule out the idea of sending it to DEP at some point, just to see what type of appetite they may have for enforcement, should we don't get anywhere very soon. Just because it is a pretty big deal in my mind in terms of the violation. What was never mentioned in the enforcement orders in the past was the floodplain. The floodway and the floodplain, to me, are the biggest ones. We've got quite a bit of riverfront and streams in town that have all kinds of floodway, and I don't think floodway fill should ever be ignored. And there is a very slight risk that it puts the town in jeopardy of their status under the NFIP as well, to either condone or ignore that type of violation as well.
All right, thanks, Brad. I see you, Bruce, but I'm actually going to go to Tom Christopher. Tom, so you did the site visit with Charlotte in 2023. Who was there?
The owner was there, or certainly an individual who purported to be the owner. He did not speak English barely at all. So he had someone who was either another employee or manager or assistant join us in the site walk, who basically did all of the communication and translated to the owner. Apparently, they are a company that does concrete forms, and they travel all over the place, and it's hard to find them there. I believe that there is a woman in the office, but I don't know if she's English speaking. We did not communicate with her. So I think that certified letters that may have been sent to that address were possibly ignored. Whether it is intentional or not is irrelevant. I do agree with Brad in that it probably is now time to hand the enforcement order to the constable and have a uniformed officer deliver it, and that may have some better impact. And again, I agree with Brad about the floodway and the flood plain issue, because one of the things that they have there is this big storage container. And I don't know what they have in the container, but we've seen lots of films on TV over the last 6 months with all the rain that we've had here locally, and certainly out in the Southwest right now, where we see cars and containers and buses and everything going down the floodway. And God forbid that should happen here. The water level actually is quite a bit distant from the top of bank, certainly under most normal circumstances. But we're in the middle of climate change, and you don't know what's going to happen. I think turning it over to DEP, I generally have not been crazy about doing that because you really kind of hand over control. And the last time I saw that happen was on the floodplain issues over there at the Lancaster Fairgrounds, of which Conservation Commission supposedly has some authority or easement on that land. And all DEP did was wash their hands with it and pass it over to the Attorney General, and we lost all control over the situation at that point. So that's sort of the background history on there. I thought we were very clear, both Charlotte and I, with the owner and his interpreter, of what needed to be done. And looking at a Google shot of that lately, it actually seems like there's been more filling in the driveway compared to the time that Charlotte and I made our visit there. So that's the walk down memory lane, and hopefully
Tom,
that's helpful to the commission.
When you were there, did you hand them a physical copy of an enforcement order?
No, we were doing a copy of that at the time. This was very early on, and it was verbal.
Okay. So Brad,
think-
sorry,
Go
sorry,
ahead.
Tom. Brad, I do have emails, like indicating agreement to do the site visit that indicate that they were aware. I don't know, what standing emails would have in a court proceeding, but there's certainly some kind of record that they were aware. The fact that the site visit happened, that they agreed to the site visit. I don't know if that puts you at ease a little bit.
It doesn't put me at ease, but it's helpful. It at least shows that they've been aware of it. My biggest fear was that, paperwork has been going out and nothing's been received, and they could come and say, well, we were never really aware of this. If there's an email chain that has happened, it's kind of hard to take that argument that, and especially if there's an email chain scheduling the site walk and there's history of that and photos from the site, that helps show history that it's been there, at least in the past.
Bruce, you had a-
To add one more point to this, both Charlotte and I were very clear that they needed to hire an engineer, and a notice of intent needed to be filed. I mean, we were very specific and direct about that, and certainly the interpreter understood that. He communicated it to the owner, and I do recall the owner nodding his head. So that's how we left it.
Okay. Thanks, Tom. Bruce, you had your hand up for a while and it's down now. I don't know if you had a comment, question.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna, couple things I was gonna say is that, Mr. Christopher and Charlotte were out there. And so, since with the site visit, if he sees that certified letter, he knows it's from us. Presumably he would think it's from us. So, just sending another certified letter is not going to do anything because he could just ignore that as well. So I do think that we need to take a greater step, whether it's a constable going out there, because I think if we just do another certified letter, they can just ignore it again.
All right. Thanks, Bruce. So Brad, what are our next steps?
Because it was so late, in terms of my research and talking to the state agency, I didn't get a chance to draft what I think would be a much better enforcement order. So I'd like to do that and send that to the commission before the next meeting to review, and then we can discuss it and hopefully formally issue an updated one at that time. And then I'll have the commission ratify it before it actually goes out. I don't want to send something with just the agent signature on it. I think that this particular one should just be ratified ahead of time. He's already continued to work and is doing work, it sounds. So let's get it ratified first before it goes out and go from there.
Okay, sounds good. Any further discussion? Seeing none, moving on. Number 9.
One last thing
Oh,
I just thought of is,
yep.
so if we've got the ratified enforcement order, how would that be delivered? Through constable? Is that what the plan is, or?
I would suggest that that's the way we would go to that from the get-go. I mean, we could certainly do a certified mail, but I would back that up with a second alternative delivery through constable, just speculating that it's going to get returned to us unclaimed again.
Exactly. That was my thought on that. Okay, thank you.
Thanks. All right. Number 9, agent report, partial bylaw review. Brad?
Okay, give me 1 second, please. I'm just gonna
Sure.
bring this up. Okay. Can everybody see the kind of highlighted copy up here now?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, so again, I apologize to everyone. I've been trying to get caught up on so much here that some of the thoughts I was trying to put together for some of the challenges that I've been facing in my start here as an agent, to the point where I can bring it forth to the commission and kind of get some feedback from the commission in terms of how I need to go about doing some of my day-to-day activities. And one of the things that's important to our department is making sure that the agent reviews building permit applications for anything that disturbs the footprint of a piece of land. Naturally, we don't necessarily have to get involved if somebody's added something above an existing footprint to a building, but if somebody's doing additions or swimming pools or things of that nature, the standard practice has been, which is a good practice, is to have the conservation agent review. And I'm already starting to see some things where I'm questioning, does our bylaw apply or does it not apply? And also, even before then, I started trying to familiarize myself with the bylaw itself and the regulations, just so I can be better informed from the get-go. I've read a ton of different bylaws over the years and regulations for Wetlands Protection Act, subdivision rules and regs, zoning, stormwater management bylaws. So I know how things tend to read. I've seen a lot of things that are very gray at best and things that are black and white. And I think there's portions within this bylaw that are black and white, but also portions that are very gray. The one section that we've been dealing with for another project and interpretation of, what does, exist in altering mean. I think it was, well, you've got that letter from the attorney that I forwarded as well. But before I lose train of thought, please, let me just quickly start what I've been looking at here. So under the jurisdiction, I thought there could have been a little bit better language here, but the way I read it is that basically all of these types of resource areas in 1 through 12, this resource area, because it's a separate bullet listed as resource areas in the yellow highlight up above, what it's saying is that what I'm reading it is saying is that there's a 100-foot buffer zone that's itself a resource area to all of those above resource areas. moving on in the jurisdiction, separate from those resource areas, we've got 14 and 15 here, the rivers, streams, brooks, creeks, and regardless if it's perennial or intermittent. And then this 16, this resource area here, basically says that the way I'm reading it again, is that there's a 200-foot riverfront area to those streams, essentially, whether they're intermittent or perennial. And, my brief conversations with people here in town, yes, past practice has been, if the streams are intermittent or if it's perennial, it's still treated that it has this riverfront. So that part I kind of learned fairly early on here. I had another project come in for building permit review as well, and I started reading further down. This before I get there, this 25-foot no build or no alteration zone listed as a resource area, it didn't define from what at all in this section, which it probably should have, but at least it kind of a little bit addressed that in the buffer zone definition further down, which is where I've been going to lately for building permit reviews. And again, the orange there, the 25-foot no build, that's fairly understood. The green area here for 100-foot buffer zone to a wetland or floodplain resource area. What caught me by surprise there is that the extra 100-foot to a floodplain. So that's well above and beyond the Wetlands Protection Act. I don't know if that's particularly been enforced in town or recognized, but those zone A's, those zone AEs that you see on the flood maps, what this sentence is telling me is there's a 100-foot buffer zone to the edge of that now. So that further adds a regulated zone, that buffer zone, beyond what would be the floodplain resource area. The biggest surprise in the way I was reading this is this blue one here listed under buffer zone that says it defines the buffer zone and within 200 feet of a riverfront area. So, and I've talked to consultants here in town, and their first take that have done business in town, their first take is no, it's always been, 200-foot buffer zone from the river itself. I sent this to, industry network people I have that have never done business in Lancaster, not a highlighted version or anything. I said, look at the definition of the resource areas, look at the buffer zone definition, tell me what you think, please. And somebody almost immediately replied and says, my goodness, I can't believe you have a 400-foot jurisdictional area from a stream, whether it's perennial or intermittent. And that's kind of how I was reading it too. So the jurisdiction, the resource area itself, defines the riverfront area as being 0 to 200 feet, the way I read it, from a stream, whether it's perennial or intermittent. The buffer zone, however, is saying it's 200 feet within a riverfront area. So that to me is saying it's adding 200 feet beyond the riverfront area, which gives you your regulated area at a minimum of 0 to 400 feet from streams. I don't think that's past practice of how the commissions operated, at least from what I'm hearing. Somebody can correct me if I'm mistaken, but I also think that while there are gray areas in the bylaw that I'm seeing, this one to me isn't one of them in terms of that particular definition from buffer zone. It clearly said what the riverfront area is, and now it's saying you now have 200 feet buffer zone from a riverfront area. And what's important there is that I just had one recently come in. I had them file an RDA for a single family home construction lot. I felt comfortable having them file that because, quite frankly, the construction was right on the tail end of just going beyond 200 feet. I'd be less comfortable if the commission didn't want to regulate anything within 200 to 400 feet, for instance, if their project was 350 feet away. But because it was that close, I thought I could justify it by saying I need to look at that delineation and in the meantime get some feedback from the commission here, because it appears to me that there's a regulated area in that 200 to 400 foot zone, with the resource area being that 0 to 200 foot, if that makes sense. And before we get to the other sections, I guess, is it worth hearing from commissioners at this point, Tom, in terms of any feedback on what I've talked about so far?
Yeah, I think that would be good. So of the commissioners on the commission right now, Jim has been on the commission the longest. So I don't know if Tom Christopher predated Jim, but in my recollection, I can't recall any time where the commission took a 400-foot jurisdiction from a stream. I can't recall that ever happening. I've always referred to the section above, where it enumerates the resource areas. And so I've always referred to that when I've been considering how a project works under the bylaw. So I've always taken it as a 100-foot buffer zone to the first batch of resource areas, the 1 through 12. And then I've always considered the riverfront area to be the first 200 feet. And I hadn't noticed that the buffer zone definition adds another 200. I agree with your interpretation, Brad. It is pretty clear, since riverfront area is defined up above as the first 200 feet, that this is clearly adding 200 feet, but I can't recall the commission ever administering the bylaw that way. Jim, you've got your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I'll confirm that in my years on the commission, which is probably pushing 10 years now. I can't recall ever interpreting it that way. It's always been 200 feet from, say, the bank for a river, and including ephemeral streams, right? And 100 feet from a wetland resource, well, a wetland, right? 100 feet from a wetland.
Yeah, so when Brad and I talked about this a week and a half ago, I did mention that the commission had discussed one of the other ambiguities in here with respect to the vernal pool, whether it was 100 feet or 200 feet from the mean annual high water, because the definition of vernal pool defines the resource area as the first 100 feet from mean annual high water. And then the definition of buffer zone gives it another 100 feet.
Right.
But that isn't even what Brad's raising here. That one's a completely separate one. Yeah. So Brad, I don't know if that answers your question. Jim confirms what I confirmed earlier, which is that we've never ruled it that way.
Yeah, and so Mr. Christopher's was on the commission before me, so Tom, maybe you have something to add.
So historically, going all the way back to 2012, when I first got on the commission, we've always ruled it to be 200 feet. And having appeared in front of the commission representing clients probably all the way back to 2006, 2007, I don't ever recall the commission extending it further than 200 feet. I will say that in the early 2000s and even going back to the 1990s, the commission did not necessarily have a great reputation. It was viewed as a good old boy network. And, if you had a friend on the commission, things got through. And if the commission didn't like you, you got denied. That has obviously changed quite a bit through the years, and now I think the commission is much more deliberative in how they approach projects. And I think that they're also much more fair and even-handed in the way they review projects. And certainly, hopefully I've had a hand in some of that. I'll leave it up to you guys to judge, but nonetheless, as a commission, certainly, I'm very, very proud to see the way you guys are handling a lot of these issues that have sort of hung by the wayside for many, many years. I think you're doing a great job.
Thanks, Tom. So Brad, I think I would feel uncomfortable making any sudden changes in how we interpret the bylaw. So if I can bring it back to the reason why I think you're bringing this up, which is to begin a discussion about improving the language of the bylaw. And the reason why you wanted the opinion letter to be circulated also is because I think because town council made it abundantly clear that the commission itself is the one who decides how its bylaw is interpreted, so long as we're not being arbitrary and capricious. Now, I don't know whether we would be able to withstand some deep scrutiny if someone wanted to challenge us on whether it's 200 or 400 feet from a stream. We've always interpreted it that way, and so I think the court would accord us deference, but I think I completely agree with your observation that by the letter of the law, that isn't what our bylaw says. And if we're gonna stay at 200 as our comfort zone, then we should update the bylaw accordingly. I don't know, maybe I'm being presumptuous, but I think that's where you're going with this, is starting the process.
So you're exactly right in terms of starting the process, because there's at least one other section that the commission may agree that needs some tweaking for clarification. So as I'm going through other things, I'm kind of spotting other areas as well. And for the record, I am absolutely not in favor of regulating a 200 to 400 foot buffer zone to a riverfront area. I don't see the need for that unless you had all kinds of problems in those areas historically. I have not witnessed that in my past practice. I would be comfortable not having a buffer zone to it. I just had to point it out because that's the way it read. I want to know going forward, acting in the commission's interest, should somebody come to me with a building permit application and they're 300 feet from a stream, and I can sign off on that for them without sending them to the commission for, at a minimum, a negative determination, for instance. That's really my intent at this point right now, with respect to that single highlight. That seems to be the most crucial right now in terms of, it seems like the language is pretty clear, but it hasn't been past practice, for instance. So I'm completely comfortable with continuing on that course of working with property owners in terms of having them file if they're just within riverfront only and not adding this extra buffer, if the commission's fine with that. I don't have any objection to that whatsoever.
So for my part, I'm fine with that. I don't know, commissioners.
Yeah, I'm fine with that too.
Yep, I agree.
Okay, so I think you have more. Yeah.
Okay, and then just this, I know it's getting late, but then this last one, which the commission has seen before, for at least that one other project that got continued earlier. And I read this a few times myself, and having been involved with the process of either wanting to create a bylaw or having created different bylaws for various things, one of the things we always consider as town staff, or having been on boards myself, is, if you enact something, what does that do to existing property owners? They already have, a house, commercial development, are you all of a sudden, is there going to be some big encumbrance as to what they can do with their land in the future? And I reading this, to me, it speaks of that was the intent, that, if somebody's got some existing development, they don't necessarily have to jump through hoops to go through additional permitting, to make what I would view, or typically view, as, minor changes to the land, it more or less, maintenance or subtle expansions, things of that nature. I have read this at least 10 times, just trying to decide what this means to me. And I go back to the WPA as well, and I think about why they started enacting and spelling out the minor exemptions, and, trying to make things easier in terms of utility expansion. For whatever reason there, electric, water, telegraph, those kinds of things were in the act ages ago. Sewer wasn't in it until more recently, ballpark roughly 10 years ago. And in fact, that a lot of bylaws haven't caught up to that part. So there's things that we want to allow people with existing things on their land to try to continue to do. And to me, this kind of, looking at it, it's more, maintenance, possibly in-kind replacement, that sort of thing, which leads me to my next question, which would be number 10 on the agenda, which is a building permit application for 2078 North Main Street. And I'm going to pull that one up right here. Oops. In one sec. My Photos app isn't working. There we go. So, ironically, I drove by this probably an hour before a building permit application came in, and thought to myself, that doesn't look good. And sure enough, I saw the building permit application. So they're proposing a front porch replacement here. I did speak to the building inspector. This was mid to late last week it came through. I says, is there any urgency? Can I talk to the commission about this in a little bit more detail? And he said, no, if I had an answer for him Wednesday morning in terms of how the applicant may have to proceed, that would be fine. So looking at the stream, they're probably within the 90 to 100 foot section of the buffer zone. So under local jurisdiction, I didn't see anything that would exempt somebody from replacing, it's more or less a front porch deck type structure that's there. And I then went back to that section we just looked at, that's been under review already for the other project, in terms of, does that exempt, somebody from doing an in-kind replacement to their building? And I couldn't think of a better scenario where that may apply. And I made some notes into my initial thoughts on that bylaw section 2, is to kind of keep in mind the Wetland Protection Act minor exemptions, and as well as think about historically what might have been the driving forces in town for the bylaw, because there might be projects that prompted it that I'm unaware of, that I didn't experience in my 10 years in other towns. So, the things such as swimming pools and decks and sheds and in that nature outside of the 50-foot buffer zone is the exempt minor activity under the Wetlands Protection Act. I don't specifically see an exemption in our bylaw other than that paragraph that we just quickly looked at. But if there wasn't something worthy of interpreting it, an in-kind replacement to a buffer zone activity, and I say buffer zone activity because I wouldn't want the bylaw to exempt in-kind replacements in a resource area. I should clarify there too. A Wetland Protection Act resource area, for instance, like a stream, like an in-kind culvert replacement, I wouldn't want to see exempted under our bylaw. But an in-kind porch replacement where the footprint's not changing and they're still on the very edge of a buffer zone, is this something that historically we've wanted the project to come through the commission, or does that section of the bylaw say no, we think it may be exempt? So as I get some of these things, I don't have enough experience with the commission at this point to really sign off on a lot of these permits. As I get something that's a different scenario than I've encountered, we just talked about the riverfront one. This one's strictly buffer zone. So how would you typically handle something like this? Would you see it as being exempt from the bylaw based on that paragraph, or do you typically have them do a filing of some sort? So that's really my point of bringing that portion before the commission tonight.
So I guess I can only comment on things that have actually come before the commission. So I don't know how our previous agents would have advised people who came into the office with this project. Would they have told them they needed to file, right? So I guess I can only comment on the things that we've seen. Have I seen something like this where someone is basically replacing a deck in kind within a buffer zone? I can remember specific deck replacements where the decks were larger. There was one on Lunenburg Road, maybe last year. There was somebody on Main Street where on one of the houses where they just redid all of 117 between the two intersections with 70. Somebody came by, they were doing some small addition to their house, which was technically, it was in the buffer zone, certainly, but it was in lawn area. I don't remember what our ultimate outcome was, but that was definitely an alteration. I don't know, happy to hear other folks on the commission what they think, but I can't recall specifically anything where we had something as minor as a deck in the outer part of a buffer zone being replaced in kind coming before the commission. And maybe that's just people doing their own thing. Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, so I don't recall that ever happening either, but it could be that previous agents would have told people that it's not jurisdictional. I don't know that, but that's one possibility. When I read this exemption in the bylaw, I interpret it as being exempt. I do. It says where such structure or appurtenance existed prior to the effective date of this bylaw. And where I start to run into trouble is the effective date, right? So 2007. And, as 2007 gets further and further in our rearview mirror, right? We'll have projects that don't meet that phrase in the bylaw prior to the effective date. Something might need to be replaced that was built in 2010. So I think I kind of see it as exempt, but it depends on the date. And I think we're going to run into problems in the future with the date aspect of it.
So I'm fairly certain this structure has been there much longer than that, Jim.
Yeah, probably has. Yeah.
But I'm actually noticing something else, Brad. So there looks to be a lot of technically streams under the bylaw here, right? I mean, it's all country drainage, but those would all be regulated as minimally as intermittent streams under the bylaw. I would say that yes, replacing the deck on that house would be exempt under that exemption under 215.5A. But let's just imagine for a moment that it wasn't so much an in-kind replacement. Maybe they were doing something in the backyard. This would obviously be a riverfront area in my mind under the bylaw, under different facts. Do you agree or not? Because in Mass Mapper, there's no streams, but clearly this is the town GIS, I assume.
Correct, yes.
Yeah. Town GIS shows a lot more water features than Mass Mapper does.
Right, and you actually touched a little bit about the next part. I was just going to quickly add to this is I spoke to the building inspector briefly about it. He has indicated to me that the property owner does plan to do like either a patio or an additional deck connecting another one, which is clearly going to change the footprint of what's existing there. And it will probably put it in the less than 50 foot. So I was kind of approaching the bylaw piece and like the exempt activities under the regs. And in my mind, reading the bylaw and what's traditionally been exempt under WPA, an in-kind deck replacement in the outer 50 to 100 foot of a buffer would be exempt under the bylaw. That's how I would view it. Reading that section, changing the land a lot, whether previously disturbed or not, when you get into redevelopment, I think you can interpret it different ways. But for somebody that's simply putting something on a footprint exactly where that footprint was, way in the outer edge of the buffer zone, because there's a structural issue, which if you drive by it, everybody's going to look at it, and I don't think anybody would disagree there's a structural issue there, and that's why they're replacing it. I'd hate to unnecessarily put people in front of the commission. The legal ad in the application right now puts them at a minimum of $250 plus the time frame to go through it and that sort of thing. If we felt that it was exempt, I don't see any risk to the environment for doing that in kind work. I'd like to be able to just sign off on the building permit and not have them come before the commission for that.
So I agree with you. I don't see why replacing a deck or porch on that structure in kind needs to come before the commission, because I agree that it's exempt under the exemption. And since it wouldn't apply to a WPA, I don't see why we would need to see that. But calibrating between that and cutting all the trees down, where's the line? Yeah, I think we all on the commission struggle with where that line is with the language in that section. And I don't want to get into the weeds on that section, because that is going to be a topic of discussion at a hearing later. And I'd rather have the relevant applicants and abutters there when we have a more detailed discussion on that. So I'm not sure I don't have a bright line for you, Brad, at least for my part. Go ahead, Bruce.
I'm not going to get into the discussion of this, but Brad did make a good point when he talked about mine activity. So that's the only comment I wanted to make.
So Brad, did we answer your question for enough for now, or? I don't know. I
So
don't
for
know that we
this
answered any
particular
questions.
one, I mean, because it was on the agenda and discussed specifically, yes. In general, when you have this sort of scenario, and it was touched upon a little bit, I forget exactly who brought it up, but did past agents even bring it to the commission? How do they interpret it? I mean, I am certainly willing to make a call on something that may be on the fence more or less. Should they come before the commission? Should they not? In my mind, I don't think this should come before the commission technically into the regs. Possibly, but even then, I think from the regs, no, it's exempt. But in the future, if something like this came up, I don't want to keep putting all these things on the agenda and taking everybody's time on it. This is a pretty specific scenario that I think could happen a number of times while I'm here. And I'd be happy to just make that call with the building department and handle the sign-offs accordingly. If I run into a different scenario and come up with other questions, then I want to bring that specific thing back to the commission and, okay, now how do you interpret this sort of thing? But you don't have to make any decisions here tonight, but moving forward, if I see something pretty minor, it's exempt under the WPA, it appears exempt under the bylaw, I don't have an issue signing off on something like this, or even being the blame should the commission have issue with it later on. But I'm pretty good at making a reasonable judgment call. I err on the side of conservative. If I'm unsure, I'm going to bring something to the commission. But being new here and not knowing exactly how everything's are handled, that's the reason for just having this on here. I think moving forward, if I see something like this, and the feedback I'm hearing tonight, I'm probably just going to sign off on it and not bring it to the commission.
Bruce?
I mean, I agree 100% with Brad. I mean, what we're here for, we're here to protect resource areas, protect wildlife. If there's minor situations like this, I think that Brad making that call makes 100% sense. Otherwise, we'd have a whole line of minor situations being brought before the board. So I feel very comfortable with Brad making those decisions on those situations.
Yeah, and I think, so I would echo that, and I would further say that it would just be a waste of money and time, because I can't imagine the commission would do anything other than issue a negative determination for the facts we've just heard. Like, we wouldn't even have conditions. We'd be like, why are you here? I think, at least I would be. Yeah. Okay, so I think that completes our discussion agenda, unless there's any more comments from folks. Brad, were you done going through your comments on the bylaw?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Exactly. Thank you.
So it does say minutes to approve. We didn't get minutes, and I didn't see draft minutes on the website.
I know Roz has been busy, so I do not believe that she got to those yet.
Okay.
Good, because I thought it was me. I couldn't find him.
All right, so I think that's it. Does anyone have anything else they'd like to discuss tonight?
I'd just like to thank Brad for putting those discussion items on and making sure we're aligned in thought process. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you, Brad.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep. All right, happy to take a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Motion's been made by Bruce, seconded by Dennis to adjourn the meeting. Any further discussion? Seeing none, this will be a roll call vote. Bruce McGregor.
Aye.
Jim LaValle.
Aye.
Dennis Hubbard.
Aye.
And Tom Seidenberg also votes aye. Thank you, everyone.